Welcome, everyone. I'll just work through this a little slowly so we give people a chance to continue to join. Good morning and welcome. I'm Tracy Strading, Director of the Michigan Assistive Technology Loan Funds at MI-UCP, and I'm happy to introduce Chip Werner, Jeffrey Astrein, Gina Schafer, who are a team of specialists who serve the disability community with Disability Network Eastern Michigan. I'm going to let each of them tell you a little bit more about themselves as they give you their presentation on increased audience via digital accessibility. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Tracy, thank you so much. My name is Chip Werner, and I'm going to be sharing my screen at this point in time. And let's jump into our presentation. Oops. Let's not jump too far ahead. Let's get back to the start of this presentation. I'm so sorry. Gina, can you confirm for me, are we seeing the Disability Network Eastern Michigan logo?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, folks. As stated, we are with Disability Network Eastern Michigan. We are a center for independent living serving Huron, Lapeer, Macomb, Oakland, Sanilac, St. Clair, and Tuscola counties. And on our screen right now, we are seeing the Disability Network Eastern Michigan logo, along with our website. And if you take a look at the way that is spelled, you'll see that we have an all caps DNE and then the word Michigan. That's a little Easter egg. We're going to talk a little more later today about camel case and how we can increase the readability of some of the materials that we post. As Tracy mentioned, that our topic today is increased audience via digital accessibility. Our goal is to address immediate action steps to enhance inclusivity. My name is Chip Werner. I'm the Associate Director for the Thumb region of the organization. My email address is listed on the screen, which is cwerner@dnemichigan.org. Please take note of that capital C, capital W, and capital DNEM, as again, that is an example of camel case, and we'll be chatting about that. My phone number is 810-987-9337, extension 6608. And this is a welcomed opportunity for folks to follow up afterwards with questions about how they can become more accessible. I'd like to introduce two of my esteemed colleagues right now. Jeffrey Astrein, Community Education and Outreach Specialist. Jeffrey, do you have a moment to jump on and say hello to our audience?
Hello, I'm Jeffrey. As Chip mentioned, I'm a Community Education and Outreach Specialist, and I do a lot with assistive technology here at Disability Network Eastern Michigan.
Jeffrey's email is listed on the screen, and we will be revisiting that later in the presentation. And also my good friend Gina Schafer, an Outreach and Veteran Service Specialist with the organization. Gina, do you have a moment to jump on screen and say hello to our guests?
Yes, I'm happy to be here, and I work in the realm of digital accessibility.
Thank you so much. So I have a quick poll for you, and this is more of an internal thought. I'd like you to spend some time thinking of these 5 topics. Do you, as an individual and within your organization, use alt text for digital media documents? Is your website accessible, which is WCAG compliant? And we're going to chat about that briefly. Are you producing accessible documents? Do you use URL shorteners to ensure that consumers are able to more accessibly access links that you're sending them? And are all of your videos accessible? Today's objectives, we're going to review website content accessibility guidelines. We're going to talk in depth about alt text. My very good friend Gina is going to spend some great time chatting with you about how you can ensure that your images are communicating exactly what you want them to communicate. We are going to talk about accessible fonts and contrast. We'll spend some time chatting briefly about readability, and in that we'll talk about recognizable hashtags, URL shorteners, and accessible videos. The mission statement for Disability Network notes that we are committed to promoting inclusion for all by breaking down barriers and opening paths towards independence and personal choice through resources, advocacy, information, support, and education. We subscribe to the independent living philosophy, which notes that people with disabilities should have the same civil rights, options, and control over choices in their lives as do people without disabilities. You'll hear us regularly talk about things like the social model, disability pride, person-first language, nothing about us without us, self-determination, and person-centered approach. All of this is directly relevant to what we're going to be discussing today with regard to accessibility. Our core services focus on advocacy, information and referral, independent living skills training, peer support, and transition services. We provide services to persons of any age with any type of disability living within our 7 counties looking to achieve independent living goals. And this is a brief capture of our team at ADA Day last year in Port Huron, Michigan. So let's talk about what Web Content Accessibility Guidelines actually stands for. Legal precedents. The ADA has no direct regulation over web content. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is considered to be the industry standard for web accessibility. It was developed based upon 12 guidelines. There are 3 levels of web success criteria, formed in 2008, updated in 2018. We still really do not have ADA regulation for most websites. Section 508 does have some federal precedent with web content guidelines. And this specifically relates to things such as web access carriers. Airlines, payroll services have definitely been forced to adhere more closely to web content guidelines. But I want to share some very sobering facts with you right now. Less than 20% of the World Wide Web is deemed accessible, according to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, or WCAG 2.0. The most common barrier that we see with World Wide Web access is that there's low contrast, specifically on the homepage. So our very first page of our websites that we're using to attract attention, we're seeing that 83% of those web pages have low contrast or low visibility barriers. This is something that's extremely easy to correct with proper programming when we're looking at our websites. In 2019, there were approximately 2,256 web accessibility lawsuits filed in federal court by persons with disabilities. In 2020, that rose to more than 3,500 cases. That's approximately 10 cases per week. 21% of the lawsuits that were filed against companies who received web accessibility complaints have received lawsuit complaints in the past. Web accessibility is not as complex as you may think. When I came to the organization as a former entrepreneur and an individual who built a business based entirely on social media interactions and web design, I was pretty confident. I knew what to do. And I quickly learned that everything I was doing was wrong. It was a very sobering moment for me. It didn't take long to figure it out. There are tools that exist. There are simple things that we can follow to ensure that we're all reaching our target market. So let's talk about content that meets accessibility criteria. And I'd like to start with an amazing video for you. Gina, are we seeing the screen right now that has the young man who's going to go to the museum with his mom?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm going to play a video. Please enjoy.
Mom, my shoelaces.
You can do it.
Please.
Okay.
2 bunny ears, loop around and pull together. Got it?
I don't want to be here.
James, I want you to pick an artwork you like and tell me about it. Art is a wonderful thing and I want to enjoy it with you, okay?
Okay.
What do you see?
See?
Okay.
Before you towers a terrifying scene of war. Thousands of forces break the grassy ground in a cavalry charge. Soldiers sporting blood-red uniforms ride with valor in a fearless resolve to attack. Some blow military bugles, others raise their voice in a war cry. Mighty silver blades are exalted above their heads. Leading up front, a commander on a mighty white stallion. The beast's eyes were wide and ferocious, every muscle and vein pulsing through his skin. The commander rides the steed high, his face blazing with heroism, but still in his eyes a glimmer of fear. For at the front line, survival is not guaranteed.
I'm so proud of you.
Can you describe that one to us over there?
At this time, I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment. This is a perfect example of what alt text is capable of providing in means of inclusivity and accessibility. We've all heard the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Unfortunately, when it comes to digital accessibility, a picture is worth 1 or maybe 2 words, picture or image, which is quite unfortunate. I want you for a moment to think of how much work we place into finding the right image for our newsletters, finding the right image for our social media post or our website. And if that image is being communicated to an individual who relies upon a screen reader, unfortunately, that image, if alt text is not placed within it, is lost. And all of that work is for naught. And unfortunately, we're unable to effectively connect with the end user. At this time, I'm going to bring a very dear friend into the conversation. Gina Schafer is going to join the conversation, and we're going to take a deeper look at how we create alt text and how we ensure that we're reaching accessibility standards. Gina, I'm going to share my screen. And here we have your title information. Gina, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Basically, I work in digital accessibility. So I help create flyers and social media content and work in the arena of alt text every day. So hopefully I can share a few tips with you to make this less overwhelming for you. Next slide, please. So over 9% of Michigan residents rely on assistive technology to access digital and social media. And the numbers are growing. It's people who have low vision or learning disabilities, and the average person is now finding that these tools are also extremely helpful to us. Plus, there are a lot of people who still have slow internet connections and are not able to access all the images the way they were intended to be properly displayed. So there are a lot of people that we are missing if we don't have alt text. WebAIM did a survey of over 1 million of the most popular web pages, and they found that over half of them were missing alt text, and about a quarter of that was not described properly. And about 10% of it is meaningless, it might have one word and cannot accurately portray what is being said. So we want to help you bridge that gap. And you may not feel as confident as James is in the video, but you can be equally as creative and make these experiences useful for people. Ideally, it would be a collaborative process where you would work with other individuals. In reality, most of us, it's a solo person putting this together. But you want to be considerate of the artist's intention, the captioner's biases as they're writing it, and also what experience the user will have when they experience what they're reading and hearing. Consider the purpose of the image. Why is it there? Or is it just decorative? In some cases, alt text might not be necessary. It may be just described as decorative or left blank when you're coding HTML. In all cases, though, screen readers will announce that it's a graphic or a picture, so you don't need to include that information. An exception might be if it's something that's really relevant, like it's a cartoon or an animated illustration, a GIF, something like that. You can do it then, but only if it's really necessary. You want to make sure that your images are clear and also to avoid lengthy text in them if possible. We've all seen flyers on the internet, and yes, there are a wealth of information in there. Sometimes we need to share that much detail, but it's a daunting task when you have to listen to the entire thing being read through alt text. So we want to help you shape it to make it more user-friendly. If you have a person that's being depicted in the image, if you're able to defer to them to identify themselves, how would they describe themselves if they're the subject? If you can't rely on that person to give you assistance, don't assume big ambiguous identities, gender, race, disabilities. Sometimes it's not even that clear. So you want to be sure about how you're using the descriptions with people. Very descriptive language, and if you can't, you might be able to hedge it. If you don't know someone's race, you might say they have a light-skinned complexion, for example, or they appear as feminine presenting. Just a few examples. You want to be as objective as possible, use person first language, and avoid stigmatizing anyone as much as possible. When you're objective, it's hard sometimes because emotions or attractiveness and things like that, they're very subjective. So instead of describing that the person's happy, you may just describe what expression is on their face. And if you are needing to describe the emotion because it's clearly the intent of the image, go ahead and do it. But again, make sure it's entirely relevant. Also, be consistent with names and labels. We'll see this a little bit later, but if you're doing headshots on a page, make sure you're consistently using headshot of or profile picture of, or naming icons, consistently using labels and language like that. Screen readers, they are wonderful technology, but they have limitations. And one of them is that they can't interpret the words that are inside our images. This is where the alt text gets extra helpful. Not only are we describing what images we see, but words are appearing. So you have to talk about the key text inside the image. You want to try to avoid repetition with the surrounding captions if possible. And then in some cases where something is extra lengthy or really critical information, like in a graph or a chart, then you may have to add very lengthy text. We're going to give you a few examples in a minute, and you'll see that although computer-generated alt text may appear in many of these applications for you, it's very helpful. It's far from accurate. So we want to make sure that we are including that information. after we're posting or including that in the documents that we're developing. Also, if the application doesn't give you the ability to add it, or you're not able to add it in a timely manner, and you're posting, put in a photo ID with you in the message of your body. That way it guarantees that people will understand what the image is trying to convey. Little gifts, for example, that's an example. You can't embed those. So you would have to add that ID. Next slide, please. This alt text that we keep talking about, it is everywhere. And you may not have even realized it, but it is in many places on the web, as we've talked about. The websites have images embedded throughout them, but they also have images that may act as menu items or buttons and redirect people to go to different links. So you have to include alternative text for the buttons and describe where those links will go as well. Digital documents. And this is things that are not just put on the internet, but documents that you might be sharing and attaching as emails to people and sending them. Many individuals have to use screen readers in order to fully access the content. So all of the documents, all of the Word, Google Docs, any of those things can have alternative text embedded inside of them. Digital presentations, like today's PowerPoint, they also can be made accessible with alternative text, reading order, and many other considerations. And then social media. Seems like the world is living in this other universe, and it is important that people who are using screen readers can access every inch of it. So all the social media platforms now have the opportunity to add the alt text. And again, if they can't, you can add the photo ID. So now let's give you a couple of examples of this. Next slide, please. This is one of our Facebook posts. It's very wordy, but in this case, it was necessary because there was a lot of information we needed to convey. And through this post, we were able to go in after it's launched and update the alternative text. On the next slide, this will give you an example of how AI interprets that slide, and there are several errors, and then what we actually put in there as our alternative text. It could not clearly identify the individual and what they were doing, but it did identify that there was some text, and it got some of it right. But we want to ensure that it's accurate, so we ensured that by putting in the text ourselves. Next slide, please.
Gina, this is Chip.
Yes.
I have a brief question for you. As
Okay.
our resident person who creates the alternative text for our posts, how long did it take you to assign that alternative text for that post?
Several minutes, because I had to retype all the text. I had to consider what the image was saying. We only had 2 images, the gentleman holding his head, staring at the computer, and our logo. So both of those I felt were important. So I wanted to make sure that it conveyed how desperate he felt and overwhelmed, as well as brand it so that people knew who they were calling. So it would take several minutes.
This is Chip again. Gina, thanks so much for sharing that, because I think it's important to share with our audience. You do such a fantastic job of creating alternative text for our posts and being thoughtful when putting together that information. But really, at the end of the day, it only took you a couple of extra minutes when curating the information for the post to ensure that accessibility standards were met. Sorry for interrupting, but I had to share that.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's a good point, because we don't want you to feel overwhelmed, like, oh, this is one more thing I have to do. And yeah, but it's going to open the world for a lot of people, just taking that extra time and that extra little effort. This is a second example of our alt text use on LinkedIn. So again, you can see the graphic, you can see that there's text in it, and there's a caption next to it. On the next slide, you will see the alternative text. Again, it's not as user-friendly in some ways because it's not like, here's what you might say, but you actually have to type in all that you want. So it's giving clear direction that there's a headshot of Chip, where he's going, what he's doing. So all of the text that's listed in the post is included in the alternative text. So no one's going to miss the information. Also take note that there is a limiter on here. So how much space you have to include it is going to be constrained. I would say on average, maybe 100, 150 characters, but LinkedIn is going to say, hey, after 300, people are going to get tired. So try to make it more concise if you can. So it'll give you a feel for what that's like.
Gina, this is Chip once again. I think we're going to see this slide again a little later in Jeffrey's component of the presentation, where he's going to let us see exactly what AI put together for this particular post.
Okay, great.
Gina, thanks so much for joining us for this part of the presentation to discuss alternative text. We really appreciate and value having you on the team and everything that you do for our accessibility standards. And when we reach the Q&A component of the conversation, I've got a feeling we're going to have some folks here who may have some questions for you. Thank you so much for giving us also a teaser of digital documents. We're hitting on many points today, folks, to help you guide you through the process of reaching greater accessibility standards. And as Gina mentioned, alt text is also used when we're putting together digital documents that we're sharing with our consumers and our customers. As we look at our digital documents, we need to be mindful of what fonts we're choosing. What colors are we using? What type of contrast and what language are we using? So we're going to go over some of the basics right now. And let's start first and foremost with fonts. We have fallen into this process of trying to be as fancy as possible. And unfortunately, fancy doesn't always deliver. So the first thing that we want to drive home today is please avoid using word art. Word art is easily confused by screen readers. Screen readers are very direct, very literal. They rely on programming to tell them exactly what should be interpreted. And unfortunately, word art is not one of those tools that are functional for us. At the beginning of the presentation, you heard me make a comment about camel case. Our next slide is going to dive a little deeper into that to give a better example. But camel case is an opportunity for us to help increase the readability of a document or readability of a statement that we're making in a document. And that's the example of using capital letters sparingly, as opposed to listing our document as being entirely in caps. When creating documents, please use a minimum font size of 14. On this PowerPoint presentation, we're currently using font size 24. Often when we say font size 14 or greater, the first comment is, but that means I'm going to have multiple pages. Yes, that is correct. Unfortunately, that is the reality. As we are now in a digital era, it is okay if it spills onto a second page. We are increasing accessibility. That's our target. That's our focus. That's our function. Please eliminate use of italics and fancy fonts. Our next slide will end up talking a little more about what fancy fonts look like. If you're looking for ways to be able to draw attention to phrases, we can do that with spacing. There are ways that we can do it, but unfortunately, italic fonts do not help us in that capacity. What fonts should we be using? We have several here on the screen. They fall within the sans serif font family. Those fonts include Arial, Book Antigua, Calibre, Century Gothic, Futura, Helvetica, Lucinda Sans, Palatino, Tahoma, Verdana. Hopefully some of these seem very familiar with you. Hopefully many of these fonts are fonts that you're already using. These are examples of fonts that are deemed accessible. Our entire presentation today is being done using font Calibre. The fonts that you see on your screen at this moment are deemed accessible. How does that impact a statement? On our next slide, we have the same statement listed twice. Americans with Disability Act Compliance Assistance. And I'd like you for a moment to take a look at the screen on the image on the left and the image on the right. And I'd like you to consider which of these is deemed more accessible. On the left, we see that we're using all caps when using our title of Americans with Disabilities Act Compliance Assistance. On the right, we're using camel case. On the left of our screen, we have italics. On the right of our screen, we do not. The left image on our screen is not with accessible font. The image on the right of our screen is deemed with accessible fonts. When choosing our color and contrast, we want to use high contrast between text and background for greatest readability. The highest contrast you can achieve is black and white. When using color, contrast can be very deceiving. As a colorblind individual, I have lived with this my entire life. There are tools that we can use to ensure that we're reaching accessibility. A quick online check on webaim.org will allow us to determine whether or not our content is accessible. We can always print out our slide deck or print out our document that we're using to see if we're reaching. Never trust your screen. If you have ever painted your home, you have lived the nightmare of grabbing a swatch, getting that gallon of paint mixed, going home, painting the entire wall, and finding out that the wall did not match what you had expected, unfortunately. The same can be true if we've ever tried to use touch-up paint on our car. You cannot trust your own personal screen. Print that document out and see. So let's take an example. Let's take a look at what that might look like. We have three options on our screen right now. Towards the top of our screen, using black and white contrast, we have text that says it doesn't get any better than this. Using the blue and yellow font, a blue background with a yellow font, we see this might look good here, but when it's printed in grayscale, not so much. It's very difficult to see. But when we use high contrast colors, a purple background with yellow font, we're able to ensure accessibility for all. And yes, as a colorblind individual, I had to confirm with someone that that was a purple background because to me, it was blue. But this is an example of where we can print our document out, whether it be a picture, whether it be a digital document, or whether it be a slide deck, and we can ensure that we're reaching those accessibility standards. When we talk about color coding, don't use color as the only way to differentiate information. On our screen, we see step 1, step 2, step 3, and then we repeat it again at the bottom, step 1, step 2, step 3. The uniqueness between these two examples, the first being non-accessible, we used an X to determine whether or not the task or function was completed by its deadline. We used a green X to say that it was completed, a red X to show that it was not. Unfortunately, we do not reach accessibility standards at this point. The easiest way for us to make alteration to this is to use the words yes or the words no. Yes corresponding in green, red corresponding with no. When we are using backgrounds, and this is a critical one, we have two images that are on our screen right now. This is from one of our sibling Centers for Independent Living, and they were showing the Kalamazoo outdoor fall schedule. Both images, the one on the left and the one on the right, share that there's educational programming, special events, and meetup groups. Both images discuss the opportunities for hiking, walking, cycling, and kayaking, although they both have typos on the screen. When we look at the image on the left, we used a very cluttered background. It's a fantastic job of showing leaves, which we absolutely want to do, but unfortunately, so much of that content is lost. Whereas using a border for those leaves and then using a very clear white background eliminates contrast barriers, and ensures that our document is more accessible. Simple rules to follow for document guidelines. Use or identify headings, titles, subtitles, and normal text. Screen reader devices will identify these phrases and help to determine how this information is being read on the screen reader as it's being distributed to the user. Format your layout with breaks rather than using spaces, tabs, and returns. Using that page break, using that section break, as opposed to hitting the spacebar 15 times or hitting the tab button 5 times to advance down to the next section, or the return button to go to the next page. When you have those multiple spaces, a screen reader will repeat over and over again, space, 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 or tab, 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 tab. And unfortunately, our message is lost as we're trying to communicate it to the screen reader user. Images should be positioned as in line with text. When you're changing your image properties, list it as in line with text. If you do not, the screen reader will not be able to determine when is the appropriate time to demonstrate your image, which we know now has alt text in it as well. Listing that image as tight or listing that image as left or right lined may actually force the screen reader to immediately jump into the description of the image mid-sentence or mid-paragraph. So please make sure you're using in line with text as the option. And always use accessibility checker features the same way that you would spell check. If you are a Microsoft Office user, when you click on your info tab on your screen and you have those functions of opening a new document, saving, printing, sharing, you also have the opportunity to inspect your document, and you can click check accessibility. We can spend an hour and a half talking about the many important functions of this tool alone. Today's presentation is intended to give you a sampling of options that are available for you. This is a very intuitive tool, and there are many great links and resources that you can use to help self-navigate. You can also contact us for assistance with this process as well. As we transition away from some of our accessibility tools, we want to talk a little more about readability of our documents. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to my friend, Jeffrey Astrein, for more discussion. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chip. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned earlier, I do assistive technology and outreach. I make a lot of YouTube videos with assistive technology. And oftentimes in the videos, I include pictures and I talk about products. But again, the whole concept of readability and understanding what goes on in videos and other things on social media, I need to make sure I'm reaching all audiences, and sometimes that gets lost. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that, Jeffrey.
No problem. So, as Gina mentioned earlier, when she was talking about alt text, alt text is not always accessible. It can provide very general information, but it doesn't convey the message of what we want to convey to users. One example is this was I believe, a LinkedIn post. Chip, if you can tell me if that's correct or not.
This is Chip, Jeffrey, that's correct.
And what happened is when he posted this picture of him, it was a headshot of him with some text in it. Unfortunately, AI thought his photo, it took a guess, and it simply said text and logo along with a picture of a person. So it's giving basic information, but it's not telling us who is in that photo and what the text says. So if you're using a screen reader, this image is pointless because people don't know what you're trying to convey. And this is the same case with AI all the time. It doesn't matter whether it's pictures, hashtags, or videos, we still run into that same barrier in accessibility. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about readable hashtags. And I want you to take a moment to see if you can read the hashtag on your screen. One of the things to note is it's probably taken you a while to read this. Oftentimes, if you're posting a video or something on YouTube or social media, they provide hashtag suggestions. And oftentimes everything is all lowercase and it's more difficult to read, even for screen readers. Next slide, please. So now we come to a hashtag that should be a little more readable if you check it out. Again, this is a hashtag where we use camel case. So each time there's a new word within this condensed hashtag, you can make out each word and be able to read it easier. For screen readers, when you use camel case, it can actually read it more smoothly, take more time because it doesn't read it like a sentence compared to all lowercase. Again, even when we're not using AI technology, sometimes it feels convenient for us to simply type it out all in lowercase. But this is such an easy fix when you can just use camel cases in your hashtags, because we use hashtags everywhere. Next slide, please. So some takeaways for hashtags to make them more readable. Is your message relevant to all audiences? So when you're making your hashtag, try not to always make it real long. Make sure it's relevant with whatever your text is or whatever your image is trying to convey to all of your audiences. Use multiple tags to convey impact. So again, instead of one long hashtag, you can use multiple hashtags. For example, if you're using an image that is talking about accessibility and diversity, you can make individual hashtags that you see on the bottom. So we have hashtag accessibility, hashtag equity, hashtag inclusion. These are other ways to describe our images using hashtags. And also, sometimes the more you use will make your post more viewable. You'll get more views because AI, the algorithms will recognize it more. One thing is not to use too many hashtags, but at least enough that may convey your image or your text to get your point across. Next slide, please. And lastly, URL shorteners. This is critical both for websites and then especially when it comes to handouts or on document. Long URLs, they take up so much space and it's also not always convenient for screen readers. We can shorten URLs through free services, such as going to tinyurl.com or bit.ly.com. And both of these will make a shorter URL that looks a lot nicer in handouts or emails, and they're a lot easier to click on. Next slide, please. And then accessible videos, which I do all the time. One thing that's so important to know is there are different types of captions. And when it comes to AI, they're all AI closed captions, but they do not guarantee total accessibility. The problem is they're more guesstimates and they use different algorithms. So a lot of times when I transcribe my voice or when we're in a meeting, You may see words of profanity or very inappropriate word, and eventually you lose your message across. So AI closed captions are not always a good choice, especially if someone specifically requests communication access real-time translation services, also known as COAT. And COAT is the instantaneous translation by a trained stenographer, which is what our captions are today on this webinar. Also in videos, if you're using pictures, this is the same thing as alt text, but you're using voiceover. And what this is when you show a picture, if you're someone low vision or blind that can't see it, the voiceover is what helps compensate for the picture to explain what's on the screen. Also, what's nice about voiceover for audio description is you can provide more descriptions in it than, say, a video of what you're talking, where maybe it doesn't always come to mind or any of that. That's where audio description becomes crucial. You can use these in programs such as Camtasia. You can do custom closed captions on YouTube. And even if you have Apple devices, you can use iMovie. So those are just a few programs. And then we'll end my segment with the video.
Jeffrey, this is Chip. And before we jump into this video, I want to share this video you produced in-house with another member of our team. And you're going to notice one very unique feature. The first video that we showed earlier today to help demonstrate use of alt text, the young man and his mom who were visiting the museum. If you recall, there was no voiceover to that video to help provide understanding of what was happening. We were relying on the ability to interpret what we were actually seeing on the screen, which truly was not accessible. Now we're going to see Jeffrey providing a YouTube video for assistive technology, and we're going to hear the voiceover to our colleague, Christine Cook. And here's the video.
The logo of Disability Network Eastern Michigan appears on a white background. There is a blue hollow circle with the words Disability Network across the middle in Eastern Michigan around the outside bottom right curve of the circle, serving Huron, Lapeer, Macomb, Oakland, Sanilac, St. Clair, and Tuscola counties. For more information on Disability Network Eastern Michigan, check out our website at www.dnemichigan.org. Disclaimer. Our assistive technology program is just one of the ways that we are able to assist consumers in becoming more independent. We are not endorsing any of the products we demo. We are using them as an educational resource to show examples of existing technology available for people to use and help eliminate barriers.
Welcome to Disability Network Eastern Michigan YouTube channel. I'm Jeffrey Astrein, Community Education and Outreach Specialist. I'm one of two assistive technology specialists here at Disability Network Eastern Michigan. Let's be honest, we've all encountered stubborn lids on jars or bottles at some point in our life. Could take a lot of muscle strength and even grip strength to try removing lids. Some of us use rubber grips. They can help, they're a useful tool, but sometimes the lids just won't budge. Thankfully, there's many other assistive technology devices that help open jars and bottles. They can be both electric or manual. One excellent device is known as the RoboTwist. The RoboTwist is an electronic device that helps open double lids on jars and bottles. It simply does its job with the touch of a button, which is really convenient. It can open jars hands-free. However, I strongly recommend holding on to the jars. This ensures stability and minimizes the risk of spills. Let's see how the device works.
The video shifts to a close-up on the RoboTwist that is white in color with a green, round operational button on the top. Jeffrey places the RoboTwist on the top of a jar with a checkered white and red lid. It has two sets of arms with rubber grips. The inside arms grip the lid and the outer arms grip the jar. Jeffrey pushes the green button on the top of the RoboTwist. Both sets of arms slowly tighten onto the lid and the jar. Once the RoboTwist secures itself to the jar, the inside arms slowly twist counterclockwise to unscrew the lid. Once the lid is loosened, both sets of grips move slowly away from the jar. Once the RoboTwist completes its full motion, Jeffrey lifts the device off of the jar and removes the lid.
Now that was easy. If you like this video, please click on our subscribe button. We'll regularly post other assistive technology devices to our YouTube channel, and hopefully you'll stay tuned. Thanks for watching.
Mission statement. Disability Network Eastern Michigan is committed to promoting inclusion for all by breaking down barriers and opening paths towards independence and personal choice through resources, advocacy, information, support, and education. Disability Network Eastern Michigan's vision is together the work that each one of us does helps towards our vision of being a community where those living with disabilities are empowered to pursue personal growth and choice through access to community resources and supportive services. Disability Network Eastern Michigan's logo appears again on a white background, serving Huron, Lapeer, Macomb, Oakland, Sanilac, St. Clair, and Tuscola counties. For more information, check out our website at www.dnemichigan.org.
And I'm going to stop my screen share at this time. Jeffrey, you do such a fantastic job with those videos, and we're so thankful to have you on the team. I love the opportunity for us to be able to show the contrast between those two videos. The first video, which was professionally produced, and it did not have the voiceover that was dropped in there. Jeffrey, I know you and Christine usually create 2 to 3 videos per month within the organization. And then Camtasia is one of the programs that you use to help put that video together, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And how long does it usually take you to film one of our videos that are fully inclusive?
Sometimes it takes a full day to film because you really have to think about all the elements you're putting in. It's not just about the product. You have to describe what the product's doing. If someone is low vision or blind, you have to make sure you're providing a description of what the product looks like or the item that you're trying to convey. So those are all important elements. On top of that, making the video itself can take 3 to 4 days, sometimes longer, depending on how long it is and what it is that we need to convey.
But the benefit is that once that video is out there, you have the opportunity to use it indefinitely. And that information can be distributed and you're always guaranteed to be reaching accessibility standards, correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I do want to apologize, folks. Earlier, I realized my video was turned off while I was presenting, and that is an accessibility no-no, and I'm very, very sorry for that. Returning to our screen share at this time. So we've covered a ton of content. Now I ask you, that same poll that we discussed earlier, will you begin using alt text for digital media and documents? Do you have a better understanding of how to do so? Are you able to navigate that on a variety of platforms, such as how do I include that in Facebook? How do I include that in a LinkedIn post? If there's no opportunity for me to add alt text or click an alt text button, do I feel more comfortable now listing a photo ID to give an understanding of what's included in that alt text? If I'm unsure as to whether or not my website is WCAG compliant, am I going to reach out to my team to make sure that we are reaching all accessibility standards? And are we conducting WCAG assessments of our website on a monthly basis? Are we going to begin producing, or do we have tools now to begin producing more accessible documents? Simple features such as ensuring that we're using accessible font, ensuring that our font sizes are at least 14 or greater. We're testing the documents before we send them to make sure that they're reaching contrast standards. Can we begin using URL shortener services? And this is a product that I personally love. And the benefit of that URL shortener is if you have a paid subscription, you own whatever URL you create. So for instance, if we create a URL that says tinyurl.com /DNEM reviews, if we change our review program, our review document, if we change the link that we want folks to go to, we still maintain that same URL shortener. Very similar to using a QR code, which is also very popular within the workspace. And do we have tools now that we can begin using to create accessible videos for all? In the video, we mentioned that our vision statement is together, the work each of us does help to create a community for those living with disability, where those living with disabilities are empowered to pursue personal growth and choice through access to community resources and supportive services. It's our responsibility for all of us to work together to create more accessible content, because unfortunately at this point in time, there is no strict governance that is required. For those wishing to learn more about Disability Network Eastern Michigan, we offer a variety of additional programs and services, including accessibility education, similar to what we're doing here. We can dive deeper into helping you take a look at your website, take a look at your documents, take a look at your best practices to ensure that we're reaching accessibility standards. We also have ASL classes, assistive technology, benefits planning, DEIA training, as Jeffrey mentioned earlier, living well presentations, a loan closet. We have benefits planning through MMAP. We have mobile outreach programs. We offer programs for prevention of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, resource advocacy, veteran services, which Gina mentioned earlier. As we look at this screen here, we're able to see all of our social media links. I want to point out, as you're looking at this screen, we've added alt text for that Facebook logo. We've added alt text to show that it's the logo for Instagram, the logo for LinkedIn, the logo for YouTube. Also, when programming this slide deck, we made sure that the very first thing that a screen reader is going to read is the title on the very top, which is DNEM social media links. Next up, the next thing to read is the Facebook logo icon, then our Facebook address, and continuing down the screen, working left to right. The way that our eye would normally gaze at the screen to interpret the data that's being shown is the same way that this document has been programmed to read on a screen reader. Our next slide shows the locations of our physical offices in Troy and Fort Gratiot, and then reading order will progress to show our offices in Sandusky and Lapeer. And we can be reached via phone at 586-268-4160, or in the thumb area, we can be reached at 810-987-9338. And the last slide that we're going to share before we roll into question and answer is a recap of our logo, which does appear with alt text. The alt text for that logo reads Disability Network Eastern Michigan logo, and our service area being Huron, Lapeer, Macomb, Oakland, Sanilac, St. Clair, and Tuscola counties. And then once again, utilizing camel case to make sure that our website stands out, it's dnemichigan.org. At this time, I'm going to stop my screen share. Tracy, I'll invite you to return to the conversation with us, and we'll see if we have any questions that we can answer.
Sure. So anyone who has questions can drop them in the chat, pardon, or the Q&A. I apologize, I don't know what happened there. So we did have a couple of comments during the presentation. So while we're waiting for folks that may have questions, I'm just going to go there. We have the captioning done right now by our captioner in a separate browser window because of updates to Zoom that we've not quite. So there, I'll be working on that, but that's where it was, and it looks like people were able to find it.
Tracy, I'll share with you, I had the nightmare situation as a presenter. If anyone saw me stumble for a second, I had a Zoom update that occurred just before we started this presentation. And as I shared my slide deck, I had no access to my camera at all whatsoever. So I was looking at a blank screen and I went, where are all the wonderful people that I love being able to interact with? Scott, I know you're about to leave in a moment, but thank you for the post that you put up that read, just a comment, a business, agency, or organization is missing out by not reaching all people that benefit from information by learning these tools. Scott, my good friend, you are absolutely correct. This is a way for us to be able to enhance communication with our communities. And please remember, if we are not presenting our information in a method that allows the end user to feel valued, to feel as though they have an equitable seat at the table, our conversation is flawed. We at that point are raising animosity. We are forcing our consumer at the other side of the table to feel uncomfortable because we are not reaching them. We remind folks all the time, communication is a two-way street. It's not just us projecting information, but it's making sure the information that we're projecting is being received. And even in this sense, Tracy, it's so welcoming to be able to see you right now because previously I felt so uncomfortable in the presentation because my screen had completely blanked out, and that leads to an uncomfortable situation. And this is content I've presented for the last 2 years. We want to make sure that we're reaching our consumers where they want to be met.
I think I learned so much, and as people are leaving compliments, I'm looking at those, and we can certainly discuss those. But I just want to tell you, I recently had an interaction where my county sends local updates about things happening at the Board of Commissioners meetings and the county in the county I live in, and I got the newsletters, and the one created by the clerk was a dark, not dark, but medium gray lettering on a light gray background, and I am a person of fairly good vision with correction, and I could not read the thing. And the first month that happened, I thought, well, somebody will complain, right? That's the first thing you do. And then the second thing is I sent an email, and they sent an email back and said, which one? And I'm thinking it cannot be that difficult for you to look at, because I get 5 or 6 different updates from different areas of the county, the one that I'm talking about. And it was well written. It was a lovely piece of information, but barely accessible to someone who had fairly good vision. And so I sent it back and I just said, you know, on that background and I gave them specifics. And I think in general, I think that I know a lot about accessibility. And what I learned today is that there's an awful lot I don't know. Not only don't I know, but that I wasn't even thinking the information about, you know, showing the picture and then showing the alt text. And then I've done that in presentations where I've put my own description in there, but the points given there were very, very helpful, that and the document stuff, and just simply thinking that because we've worked in the disability field, like I'll speak for myself, because I've worked in the disability field for a lot of years and I'm learning new things as I go, there's still something more to learn. And this was absolutely fascinating. I found it fascinating. So I see others are saying things like that as well. But
yeah, you know, Tracy, it's worth noting, you know, when we talk about WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guideline, it really is the only form of governance we have right now in the United States over websites. We are seeing a large number of lawsuits that are pushing, enforcing accessibility standards. If you go to the Disability Network Eastern Michigan website, on the lower left corner, you'll see a little accessibility feature where we have an AI overlay on our website. And I want to chat about that just for a brief second if we have time to do so, because I think we still have another 5 or 6 minutes left for the day, correct? Fantastic. That's a tool. It's a resource that we're able to use to help guide the development of our website. Just by plugging that resource into our website, it did not mean that we were suddenly fully accessible. We did receive a passing grade immediately on our website to reach WCAG standards. But when you look at our staff page, there are 40 headshots of our staff. Each one of those headshots read photo of person 40 times over and over again. I don't know if anyone on the call has ever had to capture headshots for the staff. It's not fun for the person who's getting their photo taken. It's not fun for the person who's taking the photo, because you have 40 people coming into a room and well more than half of them don't like you that day because you're the person taking their picture. And we work so hard to curate that photo, and we know a picture is worth 1,000 words. Or in this case, it goes onto a website 40 times over saying headshot, 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 headshot. We changed the alt text for every single one of our headshots to read headshot of Gina Schafer. Click to learn more. The button that we have on our page that says, click here to learn more. Alt text is programmed into that button. Otherwise, previously it said connect. It was our opportunity to connect. There's no understanding or dialogue to help explain what am I connecting to. We want to be very specific with some of that content. But as Gina mentioned, information that's on there that's purely decorative and has no meaning for the image that we're trying to convey does not need to be read by a screen reader.
So interesting. Does anyone else have questions or more thoughts as we go? I know that a lot of people are saying great information and that their website needs some work, things like that. But any other thoughts or questions at this point? Okay, so I am going to thank you, Chip, Gina, and Jeffrey, and tell you I really, really thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. My documents are going to be very different. I'm a returner, return down to the next page. I will not be doing that anymore. So I learned an awful lot, and that's a win, if nothing else. So thank you for doing this for us. I'm going to invite the audience to join us next month when Amy Stirk, the program director of Michigan Assistive Technology Program at Michigan Disability Rights Coalition. She's a woman with invisible disabilities and has been working in the aging and disability community for over 20 years and started her career helping people transition out of nursing facilities, progress to policy and program development to support community living using assistive technology. Amy and I've known her since she actually was doing that first job we talked about. She'll provide an overview of the Michigan Assistive Technology Program, including resources and devices available for demonstration and short-term loan. So I'm going to invite you all to join us on Thursday, May 11th at 10 a.m. for that session. And again, what a great crew. And it felt like such a wonderful learning opportunity and also a really entertaining way of presenting. So it's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us, Tracy, and folks, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to be able to help answer some of those questions that you may have offline.
And I also wanted to tell you that many disability don't have all these same services, but there are many core services. If you don't live in the counties that were mentioned in the presentation, there are other disability networks around the state that do great work. Everywhere from SAIL in the Upper Peninsula to Disability Network Southwest Michigan there are some really great organizations around the state doing different but core services that are the same all the way across the state. So there's one near you. Feel free to Google that information and talk to them about their services that are available also.
Tracy, that's such a great statement. There is a Center for Independent Living to reach every nook, corner, cranny of our state and our country. There is at least one CIL in every state. There are more than 400 CILs across the country, and we all work together. So give us a shout if you're trying to connect with one, and we will make sure that our colleagues and friends are able to help connect with you.
So thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.